obviously a very cyber-focused company providing a variety of software solutions, data analytics solutions, hardware solutions to dealing with a lot of the protections and a lot of things that exist on a regular basis. Basically, what they've managed to do is take everything that they've learned on the government, where they have seen the worst side of things, and try and bring it to the outside and create a little bit more applicability for the rest of us. We're very thankful for them for joining us this morning. What I would like to do, I suppose, is do a very brief introduction of who each of them are. Shana, we will start with you first. Seems appropriate. And if I apologize for reading this. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. And I'm going to read this, and then Shana, you're going to have to help me interpret it, if you don't mind. Dr. Fox is currently conducting cognitive intuition and machine learning research in the human behavior realm for tactical mission applications. Her work supports such things as temporal event prediction, threat assessment, influence identification, insider threat, and human-robot teaching. All that being said, and I could go on, and it's a lot of words and it's difficult, the thing that Shana explained to me yesterday that probably sums up what she does and her participation in this better than anything is basically she looks at it from the standpoint behind every cyber attack is a human being. And she brings to the table the concept of what does that mean and how can we deal with that human being. Tim Teal, I'll just introduce you, Tim, for a quick second. Tim is a veteran, Navy veteran, after he spent plenty of time in the Navy going places which he cannot tell us about, hiding, maintaining cover in a variety of places around the world. He ended up going to work for NSA. Among Tim's many achievements, in addition to many of the awards and the medals that he received in the process, Tim was in charge of Cyber Command at NSA and helping to bring a lot of products to the market, a lot of innovation, and he took a very different approach in how he went about doing that. After how many years in the government, Tim?
So since '85, so okay. Couple.
After all those years, Tim decided it was time to maybe leave the government and go in a different direction. He started the Bellwether group with Shana. They have a wonderful thing going. I am proud to say that they are both friends, clients, vendors that we've used in a variety of things. They wholeheartedly have our endorsement in terms of they know what they're talking about. I have to also confess that in all of the conversations, I've had lunch with Tim, I've talked with Tim on the phone, Tim and Shana, I've talked on through Zoom. I always walk away saying, I wonder if I've disclosed too much, that somehow in the mix that they know a little bit too much, that they're going to get into one of my systems. I assure you that today, no one is hacking you. No one is looking into your system. Nobody is trying to get in there in any way. With all that being said, Tim and Shana, I'm happy to turn this over to you. You guys can take it away from there and then we'll run.
So hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to meet you. And boy, we're going to have some fun today. You know, as Don mentioned, we have a little bit of experience in this area. I think Shana and I's backgrounds complement one another quite a bit. And, you know, as Don also mentioned, really would like this to be as interactive as possible. One thing that used to frustrate me is just getting up in front of folks and talking and you listen and you don't really get your questions answered. So what I would really prefer is that as we're talking, feel free, you know, as Don said, you know, raise your hand, do whatever you need so that we can kind of work through this. I guess one other disclaimer I want to make though is I don't know everything, neither does Shana. So, you know, if you ask a question, I'll tell you, look, I don't know the answer to that. So, but maybe we can go find out together. So I don't want to pretend that I know everything here. Shana, you have any words?
I'm thrilled to be here, and it's great to meet everyone virtually. Let's have some fun.
Now, the one thing that we're going to do before we sort of launch into the sort of a presentation and talking, we're going to take about 10 minutes and jump out into some groups, just some networking groups. But one of the things before I send everybody out into those groups, Tim, you're going to have to put your mic back on, because what I want to throw out to everybody is a term, just to give you a little sense of Tim's background. I'm going to throw a term out to you. The term is buckshot Yankee. This is one of the few things that I've managed to pry out of them that we can talk about. Feel free to Google it if you want, Buckshot Yankee. And Tim, with that introduction, why don't you just explain a little bit about what you actually did while you were with NSA?
Sure. So when you research Buckshot Yankee, you'll find out that there was a huge watershed event that happened. And that watershed event was actually Russian hackers, very sophisticated adversaries. Hopefully I'm trying to use this in layman's terms so I don't, talk too geekish. When I say nation state, I'm talking about actors that get paid a lot of money and have a lot of resources to go affect those systems. And so Buckshot Yankee was them actually coming through US systems. To that point, I was responsible as a technical director of what's called Hunt. I'm sure in your travels, you've probably heard that word. There's lots of vendors out there that sell hunting tools. That's where the name actually originated from. And so I was responsible to build and instrument the architecture for Hunt across the DoD writ large. And so our scope was to actually track and eradicate sophisticated actors on DoD classified systems.
So hunting. Hunting has two different sides to it. I guess there's always the hunter, and then there's the prey that's trying to avoid things. What does that mean in the cyber world?
Yeah, so it means that you just don't know what's going to happen, right? One minute you're on defense, and the next minute you could be on offense, right? So you have to ask yourself, do you have the mechanisms in place to protect yourself, right? And are you the hunted?
In Shana, just to kind of throw your component into this. So the whole idea about the concept is there's an individual behind the hunt, whether it's the prey or whether it is the hunter themselves. How does what you do work into all of that?
Well, because people drive their behaviors in terms of how they approach an attack, how they hunt something offensively, or how they try to defend their network. Understanding the individual and what motivates them and how they think and what they prioritize helps the technical side, the technical folks, know where to start. And hopefully you can get out ahead of problems by understanding the people.
So what we're going to do is just spend about 10 minutes in just some breakout rooms for a second. We're going to talk about things. When we come back to this group, it's not going to be a how-to hack. I'm going to try to avoid that to the extent that we can. But we're going to open up for some questions. We're going to keep things going in terms of what Tim and Shana can do and how they go about doing things, and what you can do to sort of protect yourself in this process. So Amber, I will let you throw everybody in, and then we'll come back in about 10 minutes. Welcome back. So during a little breakout room, one of the things that we touch base on is the hunt for Red October. There have been a lot of movies that obviously address hacking in one way or another, and we're putting aside Terminator. Some of the ones that are more infamous for hacking and dealing with all these issues, War Games comes to mind, which was an innocent enough hack at the time, and ended up becoming a much bigger deal, obviously. And Tim, I don't want to, since you joined the Navy around the same time that War Games came out, I don't want to suggest that was an inspiration for you going down this path. But one of the things that I think maybe we should start, before you and Shana start talking about what you want to talk to us about, let me just ask a very simple question. If you decided that you wanted to hack, we'll use me as an example. No, better than that, we're going to use Julie as an example. If you wanted to hack Julie, just tell me big picture, what do you do? What kinds of things do you do to try and ultimately hack Julie?
Yeah, so first I would do some what we call reconnaissance, right? some of these things, by the way, are going to catch you a little bit off guard, maybe. I'll probably go to your website. I'll start figuring out, because people like to post a lot of information. We like to brag about each other, right? And what jobs we're in. So I'll go there and I'll look up who Julie is and find out who her friends are and things like that. And then I'll start also looking at social media. What's Julie like? What does she like to do? Who are her friends? And when does she travel? Does she travel a lot? Does she post a lot of pictures? I'll try to find out as much as I possibly can. And then I'll use that information to figure out what I want to do next.
This is making me very uncomfortable.
It's not personal, Julie. He asked me the question.
So would you recommend we don't join any social media platforms?
No, I'm not suggesting that at all. What I am suggesting, however, is that before you post up something on social media, just ask yourself one simple question. Are you okay with that information being out there forever and ever and ever and ever? If the answer is yes, by all means, join social media and post up whatever you want.
And just to those of you who don't know, the NSA actually, when employees come on there or contractors start working there, they have guidelines, and I believe they're available on the internet if you want to look for them. Guidelines for what they suggest their employees, their staff, their contractors actually post or don't post in social media. And Shana, you and Tim have been sort of on the other side of that fence, and those guidelines basically talk about posting as little personal stuff as you can, because that's what ultimately is exploited. Shana, this is sort of your world. So talk to me about, if I knew what it was that you liked, as Tim just talked about, he's doing his reconnaissance on Julie, he's looking at some of those things. What's sort of the next step? Where would you go? What would you look for in terms of what you ultimately wanted to do with that information?
So it depends what my goals are. If the goal is to break into the network, start there. We'll assume that that's the goal. Once I know what interests somebody, then you can embed, let's say, malware or something that allows access into something that they're interested in. So let's take, for example, I like dogs, right? And say, all right, I know Shana likes dogs, and I know she is more likely to go to a website with dogs or click on a picture with a dog or something like that. So if I can embed something into that or send her a phishing email suggesting to join a boxer group. We know you love boxers. Why don't you join us? We're going to do a thing for boxer rescue, right? That's a really good way to get somebody to start clicking on things. And it takes a very small amount of information about that person. And then from more of a counterintelligence standpoint, if I can get that person to go to the boxer rescue, I can start to get to know them and get close to them, right? Hope that helps.
That's perfect. So let me ask it this way, and either one of you can jump in to answer this. So I'm just a lowly guy sitting at home on my couch, connecting my iPad and surfing the net. Why would anybody try and hack into my home system?
It depends. There's lots of motivations to do that. And you might be that guy sitting on a laptop and think that, you know, what you're doing is not really that important. I would ask you a couple of questions. Where do you work? Is the intellectual property at your work important? Are the people that you associate with important? Is the data that they have important? And if you answer yes and or maybe, then I think we just answered that, right? And that's the way that this works.
So I could just be a cog in a much bigger thing that you're trying to get at in the process.
Correct. Yeah, I might use you to get to 3 levels removed to somebody else. You're a piece of the puzzle. So I find out, you know, like Shana said, she likes dogs. Okay, well, maybe I'll join a dog group and so I can interact, right? I like to learn about the human aspect of this so that we can, I wouldn't say the word target because that's probably not appropriate, but I'll become friends with you and I'll figure out how, you know, how to what makes you motivated, right?
Fantastic.
A
All right.
question, if I could ask.
Yeah.
You mentioned that, or Shana mentioned that there could be a phishing attempt. What are some things that we would look for to recognize a phishing attempt? And what do you do if you accidentally click on it and then you realize you have that, oh crap moment, I just clicked on it? Is there something you can do to protect yourself?
So I'll start off with the identifying phishing and then leave it to Tim to talk about cleanup on aisle 9. So phishing has gotten a lot more nuanced. It's a lot harder to detect these days. In the very beginning, you could see it because people wouldn't use complete sentences. They call you by the wrong name, a lot of misspellings. These days, it's gotten so realistic. So we had a phishing attempt not that long ago. It was an invoice request. They wanted us to go update something. Only, you know, it looked very realistic. And Tim sent it over to me and said, oh, can you deal with this paperwork? And I looked at it and I said, well, no, everybody knows you don't contact Tim for the paperwork, you contact me. So why did this go to him in the first place? And then I started digging through the email more and more and more. So the first thing to do is to understand that you have to be critical about when somebody sends you an email or a text or anything and asks for information, that you step back and say, I don't know if this is real or not. And you can always contact those people directly. The next thing is there are red herring phishing attempts these days, which is where they send you something that's very, very obvious so that you can say, oh, I caught it. I caught the phishing attempt. And then they send you something much more nuanced afterwards. So your guard is down because you think you already caught it. So what happens if you accidentally click because it's so realistic and you say, got to deal with this invoice? That's Tim.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm guilty too. And I think most of the people on this phone call or VTC right now are also guilty of doing things quickly. Yes? Read things, scan, skim, right? I don't look at the source of the email where it originated from. So let me tell you some of the approaches that I might utilize is I'll just simply replace a letter O from your name with a 0. How many times do you actually look at the source of the email before you start clicking on things? I'm betting the answer is probably not many times, right? So again, I'm counting on you to do that. So I send you to that site. It looks like a legitimate link. I tell you to put in your awesome information, your credit card information, your any personal identifiable information. And then I thank you very much because you just did it to my website and not the one that you thought you were doing it for, right? By the way, that's low-hanging fruit, right? That's a simple kind of attack, but you'd be very surprised how many people click on a link, right? The other thing too is if I know anything about you, if I know you're a gamer or you like to play I don't know, Candy Crush, or I don't know, pick something that you enjoy. Hey, I'll send you a link. Click on this. You're downloading a game, and that's part of the game. But in the background, you download maybe some malware, right? The next thing you know, your computer's spinning and it looks like it's, you know, you hear the fan spinning up and it sounds like it's about to go to the moon. That's probably a pretty good indicator if it starts getting real hot. Something's happening there and it isn't right. So I'll pause there because I said a lot of stuff. Is that helpful?
It is. So let's just spin on that a little bit, Tim. So to get to Julie's question was, you have that oh crap moment. I've clicked and I shouldn't have clicked. or there's something not right. So there's the obvious one that Julie had the oh crap moment, she's clicked on things. And then there's other things that you should look for that maybe aren't that that noticeable or that blatant about the idea that something's going on. What is it that I need to look for?
Yeah,
And
I
what
mean,
should I do when that happens? I mean, just keep, what should I do when after I've done that?
well, I mean, the first thing you should do is go back and try to figure out if you can. Well, first off, I would call the IT department if you have one. That's the first step. I wouldn't do too much more at that point because you probably want them to decompose what is it that you clicked on it and how severe is it? Because they might find out that your information is somewhere that it shouldn't be so that they can take security measures. One other thing that you can do is utilize security products, endpoint security, product that can typically, Norton's and, McAfee kind of products that can help you kind of detect those kind of things. What I don't want to do in this forum is recommend a whole slew of products to you. I'm a Mac user, you're a Windows user, because I'm spanning this across phones, anything that's, internet connected. Does that make sense?
It does. So what about let's say Julie just recognized she clicked on it. She's afraid to call IT, or she knows she's got to call IT, but they're sleeping. It's at night. She was sitting there. What do? I mean, I'm sitting at home and I've just done something that probably shouldn't have happened. Do I disconnect from the internet? Do I close my laptop? What do I wrap it in tinfoil?
First and foremost, what I would do is actually unplug the machine, right? Disconnect it from the internet. Look at changing your password, right? Those kind of things. And then think to yourself, what was I just doing? Where was I connected? And maybe those are passwords that you want to change too. So maybe you were doing some banking, Julie. Maybe you were out to, your favorite credit union, and I just intercepted all of your credit union information. That maybe now you unplug your computer and you use another device to change your password, right? Or you enable two-factor authentication, right? You're starting to see that a lot now, right? In most of these places where I have to give them a password and they send me some text and then I have to authenticate that way as well. So, yeah.
All right, so Julie's at home. Let's just continue this scenario for a second.
Yeah.
So Julie's at home. She's had this moment. She's unplugged her computer. What does she do to the rest of the systems or the rest of the devices she has at home? She's got a refrigerator that's connected to her router at home. She's obviously got a router. She has an iPad sitting somewhere that's connected. She has that wonderful smart TV that's connected there. What does she do at that point?
Well, the first thing I would do is disconnect the router from the internet, because everything likely in your household is going to have to flow through that router. That's one way to protect yourself. I know that's an extreme one, and I'm getting some looks like that's not reasonable. Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Think about all of the devices on your network today. Seriously, thermostats, smart TVs, they're constantly communicating back and forth. Smart locks, right? Unlocking your house, locking your house. They all have to talk through that router. So that's one way to deal with it. You could change your password to the router, right? You could make it a lot more, strong. So that's another thing that you could do.
I think part of it is determining the extent to what you think went wrong. So, Julie, if you clicked on a link and you said, "Oh no, what did I do?" When you clicked on the link, did you give them private information, or do you think a download was starting? And how quick did you rotate away from that link? If you did it pretty fast, then probably, the damage is not too terrible, right? But if they had the opportunity to download something and create a situation for ransomware, then your situation gets a lot more interesting, right? And that's one of the reasons why you think about segregating out your network, which I know Tim's going to talk about in a little bit, and that will help. So maybe you don't have to worry about all of your other devices.
And Julie, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Tim.
And Julie, you know, we're not trying to pick on you here, right? It's a legit question. It's a very valid one. And I also understand that it's probably not reasonable to tell you just disconnect it. So I want to have a conversation around how we can separate some of these devices and make it more secure, and you can actually still conduct business, and the kids can still play their games or whatever they do, and your life isn't completely interrupted, right? I'm not trying to scare you that much, nor am I suggesting that you just shut everything down, get in your car, go to the lake and disconnect completely with any devices. That's not what I'm saying at all, because that's not reasonable. We still have to do business, right? We still have to live.
So let's take it one to the next step then, Tim. So you've talked about in that Julie just made an error of judgment and clicked on something she shouldn't have. What about the scenario where suddenly something starts to not be right in her house? So it appears that maybe somebody has hacked through the router. So let's talk first about what do you do? How does that happen? How can you prevent it? And then we'll talk about what happens once you notice that that's going on.
Yeah, sorry, Don, I missed the first part of your question. Can you repeat it for me, please?
Probably not, but I'll do my best. So we talked about the scenario where Julie screwed up. She knew she screwed up. It was an innocent mistake. She still got her job. It's okay. But nonetheless, we have a scenario where she's sitting at home and all of a sudden, it wasn't that she clicked on something. She noticed it looked like somehow something was in her system that shouldn't have been, because she's got a home network set up. She got that router from Verizon. She plugged the wires into the back of it. She set it up and she started typing away, because suddenly she had internet connection. What could she have done to sort of protect herself from those people trying to get in that way, where it isn't quite as direct from a phishing expedition?
Well, I mean, and some of these areas, like with regards to your router, you can do what we call VLANs, so virtual LANs. You can separate these devices out, right? So that maybe like your home devices aren't on the same VLAN as your, you know, maybe your smart TVs and things like that. That's one thing that you can do. I also recommend that you do strong passwords. As a human race, we tend to be very repeatable, right? Me included. You know, password 1, password 2. Okay, now I need a stronger one. You need an asterisk or a special character. Okay, let me put a, you know, a pound sign in there. Password pound, password 1. I count on you to do that. I like it. You know, it makes it easy for people. So just, you know, basic stuff like that goes a long way, at least at the onset. And by the way, it looked like Debbie had a question. Maybe.
No,
I have a question, Dennis.
Sure, go ahead, Dennis.
I have my router is password protected, but I also subscribe to a private VPN, Nord VPN. Is that a waste of money, or is it a good idea?
I think any. By the way, that's a great question. I think any VPN is a help. I get paranoid when it comes to VPN technologies. I guess I would flip the question back to you. Have you done a lot of research on NordVPN, what country they're from, and anything that might motivate them to intercept and review all of the information that you send across there? I ask that question for a lot of reasons. One, you're counting on them to protect you. However, you are now utilizing them to transit all of your data across the wire and use them as your security. So have you done any research on Nord?
Yes, I did, and I found that they were sort of the number 1 or number 2, but you don't know whether you're reading an ad or something that's giving you associative, you know, money for good articles, or whether it's legit. So I've done the best I can, but I don't know if it was good.
I would say, again, any VPN is better than none, because that does add a layer of security. What I've observed in the past is that when bandwidth becomes an issue, usually security is the first thing to be turned off. I've heard it time and time again, shut the VPN down, I need to actually do business, right? Turn it off, turn the firewalls off, turn the VPN off. I don't need that stuff, I need to do business. So any VPN is helpful. I just request that you do your research on what particular VPN it is, and if it's especially one that's not in the United States, ask yourself if they have any motivation, right, about your data. Great question, by the way.
Have you heard of them, Nord? I know you don't want to give.
I have. And if I remember right, they'll allow you to basically show your originate your IP out of any country you want, and all kind of craziness there, and they'll optimize your link and speeds, and they all advertise all kind of stuff like that. So yes, I know who they are, and I prefer to not get into recommendations on one versus the other. There's a ton of them. What Shana and I have done though is in our slide deck, Don, that we gave you, we put some links on how-tos and some advice and tips that you can go read that you might find helpful.
And just
I appreciate the answers. I know that some government sites don't like me to use it. I'd have to turn it off let's say to get into socialsecurity.gov. They don't like VPNs. They want to know where my IP is. But overall, it seems to help. Thank you.
That's yes, sir. That's exactly my point, right? The first thing they tell you is turn it off, because I want to know where your true IP is.
So just to follow up with something quick that Tim said, then we'll kind of talk a little bit more. So there is a slide deck that they did. We didn't think it was the right interactive form to put up slides and show them to everybody. I'm going to send it to everybody at the close of this. Although you have to wait until the very end, because if you're not on at the very end, I may not send it to you. But yeah, we'll send it then, just so that everybody has it, so they've got some of these tips. Hey, Tim, let me just ask you to sort of tie in with Dennis's question too. Typical home network system is set up, got a router plugged into a plug that comes in through my wall, and then I give everybody in the house the password and they connect. I connected my TV. Julie in her house managed to connect her refrigerator because she's got that lovely LG screen on the front of it. So she's connected that. Amber's connected her thermostat because she likes to be able to control the thermostat while she's sitting at the office. It makes things a little better. What is it that I need to start doing then at that point? What are my vulnerabilities, and what can I do to start closing down some of these vulnerabilities?
Oh, great question. Especially with the influx of smart devices, they're all over the place, right? They are TVs, phones, thermostats, you name it, they're there. Some ways that you can protect yourself. And again, we talked about the slide deck. We have some recommendations in that. But right off the top, you could do VLANs, right? Virtual LANs. And basically what you're doing on your router, and some routers actually include that functionality. So it's not like I'm trying to sell you anything. I'm just trying to help you to protect yourself, right? So separate that traffic, right? Put all of your virtual device, your smart devices on one VLAN versus, maybe your work stuff belongs on another VLAN. You don't want them on the same one. And here's why. It's typically easier to get into those smart devices than not. Does that make sense?
Why is it easier to get into them without giving me your trade secrets?
Sure. Well, it's easier because they're, vendors are vendors and they produce products, and security is typically an afterthought.
No, I don't.
Right?
I mean,
it just is.
Okay. And that's an entry point into my system at that point.
Go ahead, Shana, you were saying something.
So I was going to add on to that, a really easy way to think about your different devices and how much, like Tim was saying, they might create a problem is how much do they have to talk? how much they have to go out to the internet themselves and communicate in order to do their job. So your smart TV has to go out to the internet a lot in order to do its job. Your cameras, if they're feeding back to the cloud, have to go out to the internet to do their job, and on and on and on, right? If a device does not have to talk, it's not chatty, then it's going to be less of a problem. So your laptop only goes out to the internet and is chatty if it has something that you've told it to do or is doing an update. Very different than a smart TV, right? That's one way to
Yeah,
think.
let's have fun with this, right? Again, I'm not trying to scare you. Let me ask you a basic question. How many folks here review the security logs in your home network? I'm going to take a guess, and I'm going to say none. So let me pose this question. What is normal on your network? Is it okay for Julie's fridge to be talking to the internet every second and sending packets out constantly, streaming all day? If you believe that's normal, I would suggest it's probably not, right? And so that's why I'm suggesting, putting things on separate VLANs. Again, in the slides, we have a link to how some of the routers that you have at home, they allow you that functionality built into them. They really do. It's not really that difficult, to set up. These days, you don't have to be, 10, 20, 30-year veteran in this area to set them up. Because I know everybody here is not an IT, person, right? I'm trying to give you some tips that'll help you in that area. But great questions, Don.
So I got two questions. Debbie's got a question about Alexa Amazon devices. Well, why don't you go ahead and answer that question first in terms of what are your thoughts on those kinds of devices in a house? Good, bad, indifferent? And you're not selling them or trying to drive people away. I'm just curious as to whether those kinds of devices are a good idea.
I would say it depends. What exactly are you using Amazon Echo to do that you can't do yourself? I don't know the answer to that, but you might, right? If you're using Amazon Echo to do things like turn on and off the lights and ask it questions about the weather, again, I go back to the original statement, which is put it on its own virtual LAN within your network and separate it, right? If you do that, you at least help to separate it so it doesn't go wild. I openly admit I'm incredibly paranoid about everything. Right? I'm incredibly, and so I'll go review logs and security events and find out, did I want my refrigerator to be talking all day, 24 hours a day about the spin off to the moon because it's processing? I don't think that's normal, right? But I don't think typically people or security practitioners that think like that. Which again is why we're doing this.
So let me pause you there for a second, Tim. So I'm a non-IT guy. I defer to my wife and all those kinds of things. But you keep mentioning security logs. I'm a happy homeowner, non-IT guy. Where do I even find security logs? I can look at them. And what am I looking for? What are they going to tell me?
Yeah. So the first place I would start looking is on my router. Your router likely is logging events that are happening. And it's behind the scenes, by the way. It's probably running Linux. Most routers do. That's a foundation of what it is. And it's actually pretty easy. Here's what happens though, right? And I'm counting on this as a supposed hacker. I'm counting on you not reviewing anything, right? Because that means you don't know what normal looks like, right? And you'll never pick up a security event if maybe a device starts talking to another country just out of the blue.
So what am I going to see in a log? How do I get access to that by going to look at my router and look at its history or where it's going?
Yeah, I mean, it's line by line, and they're pretty cut and dry. They really are. It'll say something like, source IP was this, destination IP is that. You can basically copy and paste in today's world. You can copy that IP straight into Google and find out. And then you can research for yourself. why is my refrigerator talking to China? Is it supposed to be doing that? Right? I'm just, you know, it's hypothetically, right? We probably know it's not, it's talking to somebody in the US, but if it's doing something, you know, that seems suspicious, it's there. By the way that the routers typically work is they overwrite the log over time, so that way the router doesn't shut down. So it has a rotating log, right?
But this is something that I can do, but I just got to start doing that on a weekly basis, looking at it and trying to look for abnormal or what looks to be unusual things.
Yes, absolutely. Anybody here can do that. They're simple steps that you can do.
All right, so let's take it to the next step. So I see something that I'm scratching my head about. It just doesn't quite look right. What do I do then?
Well, it depends on what doesn't look right. I would get an IT person, a security person to help me. I would call somebody that knows exactly what that means and interpret it for me. I openly admit that some of these things you're going to be left scratching your head like, I can't make heads or tails of. If it's supposed to be doing that, ask somebody, right? You know, there's lots of resources out there. I'm happy to help. Bellwether Group can help you, but you can also do your research on, is this normal or not?
So one of the other things that I guess we're curious about too. So if I'm sitting at home on my couch under COVID, I'm working from home, and I'm accessing through a VPN link, which sounds like that's a little bit of a more secure connection. Is my home network really matter at that point in time if I'm still connecting through a VPN? Am I still safe? Is my office safe?
Not really, no. No.
Why?
Give me another form of that question, Don.
Another form of the question.
Yeah, ask me another way.
So if I'm working at home and my office uses a VPN, because we figure that makes more sense to use a VPN to sort of give a little bit more security in the connection between the office and my couch. In that process, is the office still protected through use of the VPN, or are there any other things that I should take care of at home to sort of protect me against, to make sure my office remains protected?
Yeah. So first and foremost, what you just did was extend your office network to your home network. Now they're one, right? We go back to the original part of this conversation, which is if I do my reconnaissance, maybe I won't break directly into your work network because that's hard. And I'm lazy. I don't like to do all this. It's too much. So I'll come through your home network because it's easy, right? I find out a little bit about you. You click on my link. Next thing I know, I'm in your home network. And guess what? When you do that, and when I come through that mechanism through your homework into your from your home network into your work network, now I look like a normal user. That's allowed. Does that make sense? I'm using your VPN and your awesome security for me to transit right into your work network. Again, I'm not trying to scare you. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to educate you on the way that we think about these things.
There was Debbie asked a great question. Shana, you responded to it, but put it in English for the rest of us, Shana. ISP router versus other router.
So assuming that I understood Debbie's question correctly, she's saying, hey, look, the ISPs have routers that you can rent or buy. And what's the difference between that one and the big fancy ones that are super expensive that you can get from the store? And is it worth the money to get the other router? And my answer is, hey, look, it depends. An average home user is probably okay with that standard ISP router. We do not depend on the ISP router. We have, we actually, and by we, I mean Tim, has done a lot of comparisons between the different routers. There's been a lot of joking about that. But staying on topic, there is a phenomenal amount of difference once you make that step up. And if you are doing sensitive work at home, or you're really depending on it for your company, I think that it would be worth the money to step up and upgrade. That would be my recommendation. And we do have at the end of on our PowerPoint, we do have a link to some different analyses done online for different routers and what other folks say. We have not recommended any specific anything. We have not given our opinions on VPNs or routers, but we have given you links where you can get more information.
Yeah, and for the everyday user, the ISP wants you to use their router, and here's why. It's easy, right? Usually they set you up and you're happy, right? And by the way, I'm gonna take a wild guess in this room and say most of you have no earthly idea what the password is to your router. I don't mean that to be funny, nor do I mean it to be mean by any stretch, but typically they get installed and then you just forget about them. So, which brings me to another point in this topic, which is how many times do you actually go look to see what version of firmware you're running in your router? If the answer is I don't, I suggest that you go look, because typically they do updates to firmware and there's typically security patches for a reason, right? It's just another way to protect yourself at home while you're trying to get business done.
There's a question that's been posed by Claudia about, can the password on the router be changed?
Hell yes, and you should change it immediately.
What's the simple process to how do I, can I do it, or do I have to call an IT guy to help me do this?
Yeah, so you can and you should do it yourself. I would, by the way, I typically count on that person that comes out to install your router. I can tell you out of the gates, most of the Cisco and Netgear routers are default admin. And it's easy to look up what port number I need to come in through. Oh, and hopefully they're not broadcasting that it's your outbound connection, which is your ISP's, the IP that they assign you. All I got to do from the outside is connect to that and that port number with a default password of admin. So you're like, okay, Tim, that's awesome. Maybe not. What does that mean? I have now access to your complete network. I'm running your network for you. And if you're okay with that, with anybody running it, well, maybe that's okay in your life, but it isn't in mine. I don't want random strangers running my network.
That's why I immediately changed my password to the name of my dog.
But that's a great question, changing the password, for sure. Again, one other thing is the firmware updates. I highly recommend that home router. Just check it out. What version of the router do you have and what is the latest firmware they have? Did you update it? Have you updated it ever in the last 3, 4, or 5 years?
And is that simple, or is that something I need to bring an IT person in to help me with?
That's simple. That's something that you can do yourself. It really is. Typically, they give you the, you can look up your router model. You can see how you actually go perform your upgrade. It's actually really, really easy to do. It is. It just takes a couple of minutes.
Well, some of us, and I'm not going to name my name, but some of us may have gotten an ISP router several years ago. When do I start to, how often should I think maybe I need to update my router, not just the firmware, but actually the router itself to have better security?
I usually but of course, again, I go back to, I usually am very paranoid, so I upgrade mine every year, every single year. And here's why. With the big influx of smart devices and everything, they use a lot of bandwidth. Where does everything flow out of? It goes out of that router. That is the main hub for you to communicate from your home out, right? And, are you okay with that old bike that you used to have, or do you want a car, right? It's the same premise, right? That they get older, right? They're not optimized for today's standards. And that's the most critical part of your home network.
And is there, other than having a unique password, is there, and setting up, you talked about the VLANs, anything else that I should do to sort of help me along and trying to make sure I've given myself stronger protection at home?
Endpoint protection. Typically nowadays, firewalls are already built into the router. So that, that's another area. The VLANs that we talked about, malware protection, things like that are incredibly helpful, and they help you to protect from yourself. Seriously, because we're busy and we click on things fast. Seriously, we do. We're just click them right away, and you go, oh crap! I can't believe I did that.
Now, all right, so we've talked a little bit about home
Yeah.
networks in terms of what you can do. One of the things that I guess we really haven't touched on is we all, for most part, all of us have employers. And we trust our employers to take care of this. We think they're taking care of this. What should I take back to my employer to say, are we doing this? Did we do this? When's the last time we did this? Those kinds of concepts to try and get them on. And before you answer the question about what you should tell your employer, Tim, without naming the name of the company, when we discussed the idea that a company asked you to basically see if they were hackable, it was almost like it was the Titanic insisting that perhaps they could not be sunk. You also had someone hire you to say, hey, we can't be hacked. Can you figure out where and if we can be hacked? Just tell everybody a little bit about what that was without identifying the company, and then you could talk about things we should talk to our employers about.
Sure. So I'll tell you a quick story. As Don mentioned, I was hired to come in and help a company. Their claim was that they can't be hacked. They had a satellite system that ran their point of sale, which meant everything that runs through there. As I mentioned to Don, I sat on a bench with a pair of flip-flops. I've been blended right in with the environment. And in no time, their point of sale system was shut down. I took over as the CEO. I sent an email to the whole staff and told them to go home because business is done, which we also found out that their point of sale system was actually out of another country. So what does that mean? That was a complete disruption of their business. They could no longer operate. That's pretty important, right? So getting to the point here, and I guess the follow-ups that what would I do? My suggestion is to get a third-party, non-biased company to come in and do an assessment. I'm talking about a business now. Come in and do an assessment of your security posture, right? Your cyber hygiene, and let them help you figure out ways that you can protect yourself even at business. Does that help, Don?
That is very helpful. I just want to throw out there one thing that in my small group, Doug was mentioning that his employer actually purposefully puts out phishing scams to the staff. And then if you are unlucky enough or not thinking enough that you actually click on it, your computer, you shut down and you're forced to then go through about an hour's worth of training and lecturing by IT in the process. Rough lesson to learn, but probably a good lesson to learn in the process.
Yeah, the other thing too is, I keep saying the words busy. It's because we're busy. All of us, we're busy. We're trying to do a job and we're trying to do it well. And that's including the IT staff that you might have outsourced or that's trying their best to help you. They're trying to do their best. It doesn't hurt though to have a third party unbiased review to basically say, have you thought about this? Right? I know you have all these security mechanisms in place, but have you thought about these other things? Right? And if they haven't, well, maybe we should consider, getting an unbiased review, right? And then walking through what are the vulnerabilities at your sites, especially in the cases of businesses that are scattered all over the place. I'm counting on that, right? And I heard somebody that I was talking to earlier, we have business offices, you know, all over the place. So we're kind of counting on that to happen. And does your IT staff manage all of that or just a piece of that?
And Tim, along those lines, not only were you sort of sitting on a bench in flip-flops taking care of things. In another scenario, that was where you hacked electronically. That's not the only point into a company in order to get to their systems, right?
You're spot on. So just to kind of give you a quick, and Don's heard this story from me. I'll use non-traditional methods to get into your company as well. Again, not trying to scare you. Let's just say that you make everybody go through a metal detector, right? What I'll try to do is figure out how I can bypass that. So in one instance, I actually went through there in a wheelchair. Guess what you're not going to do? I'm not going through a metal detector. You're not searching me or my person. And once I get through there, I have a badge. I'll go into one of your offices. Now I have physical access. That's a drastically different thing. Now I have access to your systems internally, right? So you ask yourself, well, what can you do then? Well, there's lots you can do, right? I can boot and elevate privileges. Basically, I'll just take over the whole system if I can. I'll just escalate myself with privileges until I'm running that system as a system administrator, right?
So a lot of this, I get it. You're not trying to scare us. I think we're naturally scared. You probably reinforce the fear that we all have anyway, that there's so many different ways to get in. I want to turn to Shana for a second. She's been doing a great job keeping up with the chat in there. Some of the questions were basically along the lines of you're keeping a lot of very sensitive information in your computer and at home, and what kinds of things do you do? And Shana, I don't know whether you want to try and address some of that about what you can do at home to try and secure that data the best you can, or you want to kick it to Tim. Either way.
Sure. So if I'm understanding Dennis's question correctly, he's asking, hey, look, do I go with the standard Windows products for firewalls and virus protection and whatnot, or should I pay out the extra money for some sort of subscription service like McAfee or Norton? And part of this is that there's two different ways to look at this. One is from a corporate perspective of what is the security policy that your company demands, and are they going to help you pay for it? And the other side is in terms of when I asked Dennis the question is how sensitive is the information on your network? It is security in general is the more you secure, the more there's going to be a cost. So where is your risk tolerance? And that's kind of where that conversation was going. And I think this goes a little bit back to your question that you were asking, Tim, of what do you tell your employer about your home network and what do you ask for from your employer? And I think from an employer standpoint, there is a responsibility if you're sending employees to work from home to help them understand how to set up their network and how to incorporate whatever software and monitoring needs to get done. And I think that's a very fair question for people to ask their corporate security folks. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. My employer requires that I go through their VPN, number one, so they got that covered. And my question was more directed to my own personal information on my PC. Do I trust Windows products, or do I go the extra and use McAfee or Norton? So I guess I'm sort of asking for an assessment of the Windows products that come with your computer that update every now and then and so forth.
So I think for me, and this is not a slam on Microsoft, but I would add on something else.
Let me try to directly answer, I think, the question Dennis is asking. So number one, I don't like Windows. I don't hesitate to say it. Unless you're reviewing your Windows security logs, which I suspect you're not, it's always suspect. So here's what I would propose. Your personal information that you want to keep very sensitive, encrypt it. and encrypt it really, really well. Find an encryption program that does an amazing job at it. That's one way that you can protect it, because somebody's got to break through that encryption in order to get to your files.
And with all that, I want to try and make sure I keep us on time to be sensitive to what everybody had to say. Tim, the last thing I want to talk about before we just jump into maybe some quick rooms here for a minute or two, and all groan about what you've just told us. Ransomware is the big bad gorilla right now. And it exists everywhere, and it exists across all industries. It hits hospitals, it hits law firms. And as you've told me, it even hits individuals who may have thought that they have everything secure at home, but they're high net worth people, so it ends up being a problem. Tell me, what do I do either to prevent ransomware, or if I happen to be the victim of something that's ransomware, what can I do to try and protect myself and guard against that?
Yeah, and so to protect yourself, you know, again, you want to use the security stuff that we talked about earlier. Anything that you can do. And one, I'm going to tell you a quick story about a ransomware that I had to contend with, because I think it's important to put it in perspective. A story goes a long way. I was dealing with a high net worth individual who was under ransom for millions of dollars. I ended up in this individual's house. It turns out that their entertainment system, which by the way looked like a movie theater, and it goes back to one of the original statements I made, which was regarding the router. And you're not going to find this too shocking. The router was default admin, username admin, password admin. It didn't take very much effort for anybody to get into this individual's network and take over all of it. By the way, that's security cameras, everything, entertainment system, all of that. So ways that you can protect yourself, put some of the security measures in place that we talked about with the, you know, firmware router updates, you know, the security products, the endpoint protections, use a good VPN, all those kind of things. Now, if you find that you do get yourself in a situation where you're under ransom, please don't laugh at what I'm about to tell you. Take it serious, right? The first thing you want to do is turn things off. I'm not kidding. Turn it off. Just turn it off. And then call somebody who knows IT exceptionally well to have them assist you. It turns out that the individual that I'm talking about earlier, just now, didn't necessarily take those measures, and it cost them a lot of money.
Quick question for you, Tim, that I received. How do I change my password? How do I find where my password is for my router, and where do I go to change that?
Yeah, so in some cases, if you don't know what it is, they have a procedure. You can just reset your router. It's usually you take a paper clip or something like that, or you hit a reset button. You can do it that way. And then in the instructions, it usually has a username and password. You plug those in, and then it has a link right below it, and it says change password. Do it that way. By the way, you'll find that if you reset your router, suddenly your home network is a lot faster.
Why is that?
Because all of the security logs and everything else that it had, it no longer has anymore. Okay. Which gets to one more point. After you do what I just said to reset your password, I reboot my router every single day. Reboot it. Turn it off, turn it back on.
Can I add something to the ransomware question?
Yes, sir.
Yes. My advice in regards to ransomware, because again, if folks don't understand what ransomware is, all it's doing is encrypting all of your data on your local drives. And if you happen to have a connection to your work office, a network drive, it's going to encrypt all of those drives as well. And once it's encrypted, you have no choice but to pay the money. So your best bet is to always have a backup of your data. Without that backup, you're not getting your data back unless you pay the fine. That's what happened with Baltimore City. They had no backups, so they spent millions and millions and millions of dollars. Back up your hard drive and take that hard drive, disconnect it from your PC, only have it connected while you're doing your backup. So if you get hit with ransomware, just simply restore from your backup.
Hey, Don, let me ask you a question. You sound far more informed than I do. And Tim, same question. If assuming that I'm restoring my data, isn't the encryption, the ransomware still sitting there anyway?
No, a restore overwrites, because when you do a restore, you tell it where you want it to restore. If you say restore all of my documents, it's just going to overwrite whatever you currently have on your system.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Don's spot on. By the way, as soon as you know you've been under ransomware, which is why I said the first step to take, and I think Don agrees with me, is shut it off, right? Disconnect from the internet so that they can no longer get access. Because, and here's the deal, while you're doing your restoration that Don indicated, and he's spot on, you don't want them back in there encrypting everything that you're trying to do, right? So what you're doing is, and this particular individual, it took us a complete 24 hours.
Wow. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just take a quick break, give Tim a chance to rest his voice for a second or two, and we're going to go into quick breakout rooms. We'll just do it for 5 minutes, and then we'll sort of come back and just sort of do some closing thoughts from Tim and Shana to keep us straight. And then we're going to send everybody stuff too. So if you were taking notes, fantastic. We're going to help you out with that. Amber, take it away. Right, so I have one quick thing, Tim and Shana, to give you sort of, I had 2 quick questions, and I just want to make sure that you guys address them. And I know, Shana, when we send things out, people want to know how to change the passwords to their router, so we're going to have to make sure we put instructions in some fashion on that. Macs versus Windows was the question. Are Macs hackable? Should we stick with Macs? Should I stick with PCs? Is it inevitable? So just quickly address that, Tim, and then the idea about if I go into Google and as I'm going along to avoid remembering and writing down every password, I just save my passwords. Is that okay?
Okay, let me answer the first one. All things are hackable. So I don't want to give you this notion that, you know, if you use a Mac, then it's not susceptible to getting hacked. That would be untrue. However, that being said, since I come from the old school Linux and what previously Unix world, I tend to gravitate more towards the Mac. It's just a personal, well, it's a personal preference for a lot of reasons. One, underneath of it, I can configure the firewall settings pretty discreetly in the way that I want them and see if something's happening that I don't want or know to happen. For instance, that printer sharing, screen sharing, things like that, ports that are open that you might not want open. So, but I realize that a lot of corporate environments have a mix of Mac and PC and all that stuff. So, and it might not be feasible. And then the second question was what, Don, I forgot it already, sorry.
Saving passwords. So I have my system automatically save my passwords as I go through. Good, bad, indifferent?
I'm not a fan of it because, you know, now if I get in, if some, you know, as an external person gets access to your machine, now I just have all of your passwords, right? And I realize that they have password protectors for the password protectors. But, you know, there's something to be said for, well, all of your passwords are now in one place. Thank you very much. You've consolidated them for me, and I appreciate that. Now I only have one place to go break in, and now I have all of your passwords to your banks, to your whatever it is that I want. Did that answer it?
That did. So with Shana, go ahead.
Shana.
I would submit that something like LastPass, where they consolidate your password or they create strong passwords for you, is much better than using a sticky note. to remind yourself of the password. Just saying.
No, that's a great point. And hopefully we have a few minutes. We'll talk about the sticky notes and Zoom calls and all that stuff that we have time just to kind of blast through that if we can.
We can, Tim, and that's fine. I just want to tell anybody, if you feel the need to go, I know we're going a little bit over. Thank you for coming. We appreciate that. We're going to send out stuff to everybody to make sure that they get a lot of information that was talked about today, but I don't want anybody to feel like they have to stay, but you were certainly welcome to. Tim and Shana, thank you very much for doing this. We really appreciate this, and we're very helpful, very thankful that you could help us provide this to our clients. With that being said, before you, Tim, before
Hey,
you
Liz,
talk about
how
your
are
sticky
you?
notes,
Good, how are you doing?
Doing well, thanks. What's going on?
there
So
was
just a quick question.
There we go. Joyce asked a question in the chat real quick about how do you recommend we track our passwords and save our passwords? So that may tie into your sticky notes, Tim. So I just wanted to throw you out there that question's out there.
yeah, no worries. So Shana made a good point. LastPass is a good one, right? They do use encryption and things like that. I also know that Google is helpful. They try to save your passwords for you, even on the Mac. And when you're using Safari, it will save your passwords for you. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about Zoom real quick. Speaking about passwords, let me tell you some of the fun things I've seen. Sticky notes with passwords in your background. Don't do that. That's not smart, right? I'm not kidding. I've seen it. Now all I need is physical access to your office and I'm in there. It's just not a good practice. The other thing that I wanted to mention is your background when you're on these calls. Please pay attention to what it looks like because it tells a lot about who you are. Somebody like me, I look at your background and I'm going to assess and learn a lot about who you are, what you do, what motivates you. It's just the way that my mind works, right? I just look around. Do I want an external party seeing that information, right? You might be okay with your awards and things like this. I pick and choose what's back here, by the way. You can see coins and, a thing that says I've been good, which by the way is debatable. But pick and choose what that is. And, just be smart about what's in your background and your environment. And likewise, to people around you talking while you're on a Zoom call. That's equally as important. People tend to share a lot of information around you. So just, try your best to not allow that to happen. Keep your call as private as possible and assume somebody else is listening.
And administrators, where's the first place that some people having a computer administrator in your office, they start looking for passwords, things that they can do? What kind of things should you do to protect against that?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
We had a conversation about administrators, computer administrators, and what they can do and what harm they can do at the end of the day. What kinds of things should we keep in mind with that?
Yeah, and so, for companies that have folks that have admin privileges, they can basically do anything to your infrastructure, right? They have full privileges, they're escalated, and I'm not saying they're bad. That's not it at all. I'm sure they're doing a splendid job, but just keep in mind that they have escalated privileges. And so, my ask is, hey, how often do you go have a conversation with them about when are you reviewing security logs? What does the network infrastructure look like? How many attacks have we had this week, last month, last year? And what are we doing, to protect ourselves in that infrastructure?
Shana, go ahead.
I was going to add on to that in terms of those administrators, if they end up being disgruntled or they're in the process of being let go, the policies and procedures you have in place to make sure they can't do damage on the way out.
Well, and there's one other final thought. Again, the paranoid person in me is the administrators are the administrators and can wipe all of their tracks. We call that insider threat. right? And it's been proven time and time again. Are they copying all of your intellectual property over to another drive, another cloud, another thing? I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm just saying it has happened over and over again. How do you mitigate that? What policies and procedures do you have in place, you know, to review logs to see what's going on? That kind of thing.
So to sum up everything we've talked about this morning,
Yeah.
The one word that I think that probably makes the most sense other than paranoid is probably vigilance. And that's really what it is. Just spending some time to be vigilant about what's going on and making sure you've covered things down. I thank you very much, Tim and Shana. It's been wonderful, very helpful, very informative, very scary. I'm hoping that it helps people make some changes in how they go about their habits and what they do. Yes, thank you, Lisa. Yes, awareness is very good too. We're going to send out some things. It's going to have Tim and Shana's contact information on it as well. If you want to get a hold of them, if you want to follow up with anything, there will be plenty of information, or if you want to write to the firm, we're more than happy to pass on the information to them. They've been fantastic. Thank you two very much.
And
Thank
if
you.
I could add just one little piece, we have a podcast called the WCS Client Spotlight, and I was able to interview Tim for that back in, I think that was early December. So if you want to learn more about Tim and the Bellwether Group, just click on the WCS website under Educational Resources, our Client Spotlight podcast, and then you can find the episode there.
Thanks, Julie. I hope everybody has a great morning. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for having us.